The skyline of the city was dominated by massive structures, but tonight, one tower stood out less than the others. The towering office building I worked in was enshrouded in an abyss of darkness, its glass and steel facade blending into the obsidian night. Lights from neighboring skyscrapers failed to penetrate its opaque visage. But inside, one of the top floors was still dimly illuminated. There, a single desk light pooled its glow on stacks of papers and an exhausted worker, me. Another project with an impossible deadline meant burning the midnight oil. And so, once again, I found myself working late, wrapping up the intricate designs of my latest architectural project. The muffled hum of the HVAC system was the only sound accompanying the soft scribbles of my pen. With each passing hour, the office had emptied out, leaving behind only the ghost of echoed footsteps and hushed conversations. Finally, the ornate clock that I had inherited from my grandfather signaled that it was midnight. Its chimes were both a comfort and a reminder that the world outside still moved at its normal pace. Rubbing my tired eyes, I decided to call it a day. Packing up my things, I began my lonely journey to the underground parking lot, using the elevator's descent as a moment of reflection and transition from work mode to the anticipation of home's warmth. Reaching the parking level, the atmosphere shifted. The once bustling space during the day now exuded an eerie silence. The dim overhead lights did little to stave off the shadows that clung to the corners. Rows of cars stood like silent sentinels, their polished surfaces reflecting the feeble luminescence. Unlocking my car, I was enveloped by its familiar scent and comfort. But as I settled in and adjusted the rearview mirror, my heart catapulted into my throat. There was a shadowy figure, a man sitting in the back seat. His eyes, cold and calculating, met mine through the mirror. "Drive," he ordered, voice as sharp as shattered glass. My body went rigid, each nerve ending screaming of the imminent danger. But the paralysis of fear was momentarily overridden by the primal need for self-preservation. Without a word, I obeyed, guiding the car through the spiraling exit of the garage, each turn echoing with the weight of dread. As the city's skyline unfolded before us, his directives became evident. He was guiding me away from the comforting neon lights and bustling streets. Instead, we ventured deeper into the city's underbelly. Each turn took us further from familiarity and closer to the desolation of the old warehouse district, a testament to a time when industry thrived here. "Stop here." His voice broke the monotonous hum of the car's engine. Obediently, I pulled over next to an abandoned warehouse, its windows long shattered and walls scarred with graffiti. The heaviness of the situation pressed down on me. Summoning a voice that I hoped didn't betray my fear, I asked, "Why? Why me?" He leaned forward, the scant light from the dashboard revealing a face that had seen its share of battles. "I need something," he murmured. Panic swirled, laced with confusion. "What? Money? My wallet's in the glove compartment. Take it." A chuckle, cold and mirthless, slipped from his lips. "Not what? Who? But it seems there's been an error." The revelation didn't bring relief. It intensified the fear. An error? Then why am I here? "Unfortunately, you've seen me, and that's a problem." Time seemed to slow. My mind raced through scenarios, calculating the odds. The key was in the ignition, but would I have the time to start the car and speed away? He seemed agile, and the car's confined space was a disadvantage. But as the saying goes, desperate times call for desperate measures. Mustering all my strength and courage, I lunged at him, using my body weight to push him hard against the door. The unexpected move caught him off guard. Capitalizing on this momentary lapse, I flung the door open and bolted into the night. The warehouse district was unfamiliar territory, a daunting maze of derelict buildings and winding alleyways. However, fear proved to be a powerful compass. In the distance, the glow of neon lights beckoned, leading me to a 24-hour diner. Bursting through the door, I frantically explained my ordeal to the few patrons and staff, urging them to call the police. The subsequent hours were a blur of questions, statements, and identification parades. The stranger was indeed a notorious enforcer for one of the city's most dangerous gangs. He was known for his ruthlessness, delivering messages of intimidation or worse. The real twist? I was never his intended target. It was just a cruel twist of fate that my car model matched his actual objective for the evening. The rain poured heavily outside, the rhythmic patter providing a strange sense of solace. I found myself at Lat's in Literature, my favorite coffee shop, clutching a steaming mug of cappuccino between my hands. The old mahogany bookshelves around the room, filled with vintage titles, always reminded me of the library I worked in. The ambience, the scent of old books, and the hum of whispered conversations made me feel safe. I had agreed to meet Kevin, my childhood friend, after years of no contact. We drifted apart after college, life taking us in different directions. A message out of the blue from him had caught me off guard. He said he needed to talk, that he had something to confess. My curious nature, coupled with my trusting disposition, urged me to accept his invitation. He looked different, not just older, but wearier. His once bright blue eyes now looked haunted, constantly darting around, never meeting mine. His fingers kept tapping nervously on the table. "Lucia," he began, swallowing hard. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I did." My heart raced. Was he in trouble? Did he need money? I hoped I could help, despite the growing sense of unease. "It's about Amelia." His voice cracked. Amelia was a common friend from our college days, someone I hadn't thought about in years. A rush of memories came flooding back, the three of us laughing, studying, and celebrating together. But the last time I saw Amelia was the night of our graduation party. She left early, and no one had seen or heard from her since. "What about Amelia, Kevin?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He gulped down his coffee as if trying to wash away the guilt. I was the last one to see her that night. I blinked, waiting for him to continue. "We had an argument near the old boathouse. I was angry, drunk, and things got out of hand. Before I knew it, she was lying motionless on the ground. I felt the blood drain from my face. The cozy coffee shop seemed to close in around me, the whispers of other patrons growing louder, distorted. She was gone, Lucia, and I panicked. I hit her. Every logical fiber in my being screamed to get away from Kevin, to run and inform the police. But my trusting nature, the history we shared, held me in place. "Have you told anyone else?" I asked, my voice barely audible. His gaze fixed on me. "No, only you. I thought you'd understand." Understand? Understand that he'd taken a life and kept it a secret for over a decade. My mind raced. What was my next step? Before I could think further, Kevin's cold hand clamped over mine. "You won't tell anyone, will you? Please, Lucia." I nodded slowly, struggling to mask my horror, trying to buy time. "I need to process this, Kevin." He seemed to relax a bit, releasing my hand. "Thank you. I knew I could trust you." Our meeting was a blur after that. I made some excuse about needing to leave early and practically fled from the coffee shop. I struggled with my conscience that night. Sleep was elusive. The weight of the confession bore down on me and paranoia took hold. Would he come after me if he thought I'd tell? Would I become his next victim? The next morning, I went to the police station and recounted our conversation. Within hours, they'd arrested Kevin. Amelia's remains were found shortly after, near the old boathouse. The trial was quick, the evidence against Kevin damning. As he was led away, his once vibrant blue eyes met mine. They were full of betrayal. But it wasn't me who betrayed him, it was his own guilt. In the aftermath, I struggled with trust. My innate tendency to believe in the good of people was shattered. However, time heals. Slowly, with therapy and the support of loved ones, I began to rebuild my life, my beliefs. Yet, every time I pass Lat's in Literature, a shiver runs down my spine, reminding me of that rainy day when my world changed forever. The first hint of turbulence started when I was dozing off. The gentle rocking of the aircraft had lulled me into a state of relaxation, despite the thick sense of dread I had felt earlier. The flight had been smooth over the vast oceans, but as we approached the rugged mountain range, I knew things would change. I've always hated flying. Call it a phobia or just plain irrational fear. For as long as I can remember, I've been terrified of the idea of being 30,000 feet in the air. But being a businessman, I often didn't have the luxury of choosing an alternative. This flight was no exception. A last-minute meeting, a client I couldn't say no to, and a presentation that couldn't wait had landed me in seat 21A. A sudden jolt brought me back to reality. The plane lurched violently, causing the overhead bins to rattle. As I clutched my armrests, trying to steady myself, the soothing voice of the captain echoed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently experiencing some turbulence due to our flight over a mountainous region. Please remain seated and ensure your seatbelts are fastened." The cabin lights dimmed, adding to the eeriness. I looked out of the window, searching for some semblance of the ground. Instead, a dense layer of fog surrounded us, blocking any view of the landscape below. It was like we were floating in a realm of obscurity, disconnected from the world. The man sitting beside me seemed calm, dressed in a charcoal suit. He looked around the age of 50, with peppered hair and a calculating gaze. He noticed my distress and leaned over. "First time over the mountains?" I nodded, gulping down my anxiety. "It's not the mountains. I've always been terrified of flying." He smiled, but it wasn't comforting. Instead, there was a cold, distant look in his eyes that sent a chill down my spine. "You know," he began in a whisper, "sometimes it's not the flight you should be afraid of. It's the people on it." Before I could respond, the plane shook violently again. Overhead, the seatbelt sign flashed, and the flight attendants hurriedly strapped themselves in. Every cell in my body was screaming, telling me that something was gravely wrong. In the midst of the chaos, the man beside me reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black device. It was square with a blinking red light. My heart raced faster, realizing the implication of what I was seeing. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he whispered, holding it up to the dim cabin light. "One push of a button, and all our worries end." I was frozen in fear, my voice trapped in my throat. Was this a hijacking? Was this the end? Sensing my panic, he leaned closer. "What's more terrifying? The unpredictability of this flight, or the knowledge that one person has the power to end it all?" I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage. "What do you want?" I stammered. He smirked, pressing the device into my hand. "Your choice." The weight of responsibility was overwhelming. My mind raced, evaluating every possible outcome. The plane continued to shudder, and the reality of the situation settled in. I was being tested. "Time's ticking," he whispered. Summoning my strength, I stood up, holding the device high for everyone to see. "There's a man here with a bomb," I yelled. Within seconds, 2 air marshals tackled the man, restraining him and confiscating the device. As they dragged him away, his eerie laughter echoed through the cabin, sending shivers down my spine. The plane soon stabilized, and the captain's voice came on again, this time with an added relief. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've passed through the turbulent area and are approaching our destination. Thank you for your cooperation." The rest of the flight was a blur. Upon landing, I was met by a swarm of security personnel and investigators, all wanting to know about the man and the device. To everyone's shock, the device turned out to be a harmless decoy. The man, as I later learned, was a disgruntled ex-employee of the airline, aiming to spread fear rather than actual harm.